Hi, this is Anna at Clifton Hall Farms. Today we're going to talk about elderberries. We have a lot of elderberry plants on our property, probably close to 100 plus. And this time of year is the start of harvesting. We have a couple varieties of elderberries here. There's actually two varieties that are popular in North America. That's the American elderberry and the European elder. And there's a lot of sub-varieties from that. They're hardy up to zone 4. You can probably find a lot of varieties at your local gardening stores. They're very hardy plants. They grow fast. It's almost like an instant hedge. These elderberry bushes here are about 6 years old, so you can see how tall they get. Typically, depending on the variety that you purchase, they'll grow anywhere from 9 feet to 24 feet tall. I think these will be more in about the 10 feet to 15 feet height range. The elderberries that we have right now, we have a couple that are still flowering. This is a flower. Flowers are also edible. There's a lot of great recipes you can find on the internet to make elderflower jelly. They even make elderflower wine. I believe some people even dredge them in a batter and fry them up. I think everything tastes great when it's fried. We have some elderberries growing here. They're still green, so these are not ripe elderberries. People might be interested. So over here we have a lot of elderberries that are about ready to be harvested, and there are some that I'm going to harvest right now. It's a simple process, just cutting the berries, but what you want to look for are berries that have a lot of black. You want bluish to black elderberries. Those are ready to be harvested, and all you do is just snip them. Now in the early fall, what we'll be doing is trimming these bushes back so that we can control the growth and trying to keep it at a size that we can easily harvest the berries on the top. As you can tell, this bush here or plant is pretty tall, so I'll need a step ladder for that. But we have quite a few berries in here, and some of these berries, I mean, you can just see the cluster of berries on here. This is not ripe yet. You can tell that they're pink and red, and there's even some green ones on here. And what I'm looking for is something that's really dark and black. And you want to get them because when they get very ripe, they start falling off the bunch. And here's another one that I'll just clip. And then in a little bit, I'll show you some of the ways that I use to actually take the berries off the stems. When you're cooking with elderberries, you want to try to remove as much as possible the stems. You don't want to cook or eat or do anything with the leaves or the larger stems. I also like using elderberry plants as part of my landscaping design. In this case, I have black lace elderberry. As you can tell, they're black leaves. Has a nice size to it. It's only a year old, so this will get much larger. It does produce berries that are edible, but they are green and they're not very prolific. I would just probably leave the berries on this plant for the birds. And the birds do love the elderberry plants. Not as much as our blueberry plants, but they will eat some of the elderberries. This will get about maybe 6 feet tall, and it'll eventually fill this area around our swimming pool. And it's a nice accent plant with the black leaves. The elderberry plants can survive in full sun or up to partial shade. So they're not picky about the soil. You could grow them almost anywhere. I have this, as you can tell, in a landscaping area by the swimming pool that gets full sun. I also have one of these plants in my front yard, and that gets a lot of shade. So after I've cut a bunch of elderberries, then it's time now to destem them. When I first started doing this process, I would take an elderberry bunch like this, and I would go berry by berry. Very long, tedious process. I then did some research on a variety of techniques that other people have used to try to streamline this process. One process was to freeze the berries, then to take a fork and put them through. It worked fine, but what I found is that the berries thawed quickly, and then I was left with some liquid, and it was hard trying to freeze those berries as individual berries. which I'll explain my freezing method in a moment. When elderberries are really ripe, you can take a bucket such as this, grab a few strands, and then just hit them hard. And this, I find, has worked the best for me so far, that I'm able to just destem them quickly. The bugs will fall down to the bottom, and it just makes the process easier. Now, if I would bang this a little bit longer, I'd get a lot more berries. However, I always still have berries at the end of this process on this bunch. And then I would just take them upside down and just start running my fingers through them just to get the rest of them down. And I don't do it individually, I just try to grab as much as possible. And my goal is just to get the berries in the bucket. I've done this process, where I froze, or not froze, but I took a bunch of elderberries and I put them in the refrigerator to get them chilled. And I don't know if it's the way I feel about it, but in my mind, I think it's a little bit easier when the berries are a little bit chilled. However, it works so fine. You can see how the berries just come off. And if I would bang this more on the side, the majority of these berries will fall into this bucket. When I have all my berries in the bucket, I just have a few of them in here now, I would put a lot of water in here, a lot of cold water. Stir it up a little bit, it cleanses the berries. But then what's nice about it is that a lot of the little stems, any of the bugs or insects, and the unripe berries will float to the top. I then use just a little mesh tool, strainer, and then I'll just scoop the berries out and put them in another bucket, and I'll feed them to the chickens. And the process has worked great for me, much better than picking off the individual berries. I can usually fill this bucket, probably up to here, a quarter full, within 30 minutes. The other way I was doing it, it would literally take me all day. So this is a technique that after a few years of trying different methods to make this process easier, this by far is my favorite way of destemming the berries. I have a number of berries in my bucket. I like to freeze them. And the easiest way I found, after I have the water in here and I strain them, is that I'll put the wet berries on a baking sheet covered with paper towels, and I'll let them dry. It takes a couple hours just to get as much moisture off as possible. And at the same time, I can pick through the berries to pull out any ones that I don't want to freeze, or if I do see any stems or any insects remaining after my rinse. After they're somewhat dry, then I take a larger baking sheet and I freeze them. And I usually keep it in my freezer overnight, and then I have a larger container that I store in the freezer that then I put the frozen berries in. This allows me to pull out the berries as I need them for recipes without having one big frozen mass of berries. So if I need 7 cups for making jam, then I can take out 7 cups of individual berries to make my jam and leave the remaining berries in the freezer. Now my elderberries, what I use them for is to make an elixir. It makes a great antioxidant immune booster drink that we take in the winter time. We usually take an ounce per day, and in the winter I'll put the recipe on our blog. I also make wine. I need 4 pounds of berries just to make 1 gallon of wine, and I plan on making 10 gallons of wine this winter. That'll equate to about 60 bottles of wine, and I like to make jams and jellies. So I do use a lot of elderberries. I don't eat them plain. I don't put them in my smoothies. They're very tart, bitter. I don't like them plain, but I do like them cooked. I do like them in wine, and I do like them in our elixir.